Hey there, this is Sumit So, and in this video we are going to learn about Blob Web APIs. Blob stands for Binary Large Object. Blob is used to convert data, whatever data you have, PDF, image, videos, blah blah blah, whatever data you have into Blob object. So Blob represent a raw form of that data, and it's quite interesting because with the help of Blob we can transfer that data over a server, or we can display that data. We can create a URL and we can display that data, and we can use a lot of method. We can read particular part of that data. So Blob objects are quite interesting, and I have also created this blog page. You can find link in description so that you can follow along with this video. Yeah, so that's all with this introduction. So let's start what this video is about. In our website we deal with different type of data such as text, images, sounds, or it could be any type of multimedia content. Whatever type of data you have, it can easily converted into a Blob object. Blob represent raw binary data, and benefit of converting these data into Blob is that Blob object is streamable. You can stream that data over a network. I mean how cool is that? You have a data structure or any type of object, you can put that data on a server, you can transfer from one machine to another. That is something. This is one property about Blob. Another property it provides is slice. You can get access to certain part of that data, and it provide properties like URL. You can create a URL, you can create a link, and with the help of any interface you can display that to user. For example, we have image, we can create a URL, and with the help of image tag, or we can say this image interface, we can display that data to user. You cannot directly access data of Blob. For that we are going to use some sort of instance method that its interface provide. Now let's see very simple example. I have this string, and what I'm doing, I'm using a Blob constructor. But right now let's see what's happening here. I'm converting this string into JSON format. It is a simple text, okay, and I'm converting it into a Blob object. And let me show you what this Blob object look like. Let me console log this Blob. Okay, I have linked this JavaScript file to this HTML file. We can run this HTML file on a server, and let's see how it look like. Open browser console. In console you can see this Blob object. We have just the size and the type property. Size represent number of bytes and type represent the type of data. So let's analyze what's happening here. Okay, so we have this text red medicine. What we are doing, we are converting it to a Blob. Blob represent raw binary data. So this R is a character and it is of 1 byte. We know that in JavaScript each character is of 1 byte, so it represents 8 bit, or we can say 1 byte. So this is how it is encoded in Blob object. So these are their ASCII values. For capital R it's 82, for small a it is 97. So this is how a Blob object is created. We cannot actually read these value directly. For that we are going to use some sort of method that its interface provide. Now let's talk about Blob interface. Blob is just a class, right? So it is going to have a constructor, instance properties, and instance method. Like we saw in previous example, we created an instance of a Blob using instance constructor, and it has two parameters. One is Blob part, which is an array. In this array we can pass as many objects or data structure as we want, and the second part is optional part. So it is an object which defines the type of data. Slice is going to help us create a clone of certain part of that Blob instance. So we pass in slice method, we pass 3 parameters. One is the offset, which is starting part, and another is the length, which is the amount of bytes I want to create clone of, and the third parameter is Blob itself. So one is slice method, we are going to see in a moment, and these are the another method. This method going to help us read that Blob instance, but this method has different applications. For example, this stream generally used when we want to transfer data from one part to another over a network, and text method and arrayBuffer method return as promise. Those promise are resolved to some value. For example, this text represent that actual value, what that actual value is. For example, in this case it is going to display this actual value, and ArrayBuffer return us that encoded string which we have seen in a previous example. So this is how this class work. So these are different parameters, different constraint of this class. Now before diving into these methods, first I want to talk about FileReader Web API, because that's the API which is generally used to read those Blob instance we created. If you want to read raw data which is present inside Blob object, you have two options. You can either use this method, or what you can do, you can use this FileReader Web API. So this is a web API which helps web applications to asynchronously read the content of the file which contain raw data, or we can say binary data. And we know that we only have two type of object. One is the instance of this blob and another is the instance of this file. These objects contain raw data, and we can use this web API to read that data, and it has these methods to read that data in different form. We can read that data in form of ArrayBuffer or in form of string, or we can also create a data URL, and obviously we can read that data in form of text. Let me show you an example here. So I have created this function. So this is the function I created. This function takes a file, and this file should contain that raw data. So what we are doing, we are creating an instance of this FileReader Web API. So this is the reader we created, and this reader run this event after loading the entire data. Okay, so this is the function we are firing, and when all the data is loaded, this callback function is fired, and it is displaying the content of that file. Okay, so here we are reading the blob file as text, and obviously we need to call this function. So I have created this blob object here, and here I'm calling this function. So let's see what it is going to display in console. As you can see, it is displaying that text, and we can also read this data in form of buffer. As you can see, now it is displaying this data in form of buffer. So this is how we can use a FileReader Web API. But there is one problem with this API. You can use this function in some browser, but it is not recommended to use this function, because some browser might not support this function. So that's the thing with FileReader Web API. Now let's see how all these methods work. I have included example for each of these method, and it's quite obvious from their name that what these methods are going to do. For example, this slice method is going to create snapshot of the memory, and these methods are going to read that blob content. So this stream method return us readable string, and these two guys return us promise which are resolved to ultimate value. For example, this text resolved to text, and this ArrayBuffer resolved to ArrayBuffer. Now let's see how slice method works. Imagine this is your memory, and this memory has 10 slot from index 0 to index 9. So it has 10 slot, and what I want to do, I want to create clone of this part of the memory, and in order to create clone of this part, you can use this slice method. So this slice method takes three arguments. One is the starting point, we sometimes call this offset. Starting point here is 2, and the end point is 1 more than the last index. Here last index is 7, so end index will be 8, and blob itself. So this is how slice method work. And as you can see here I want to read first name of the user, and I passed first index, last index, and that blob. And finally I'm calling this function which we have seen previously. So this function here is using FileReader API to read the content of that particular part. So let's see it in console. Here it is returning us this ArrayBuffer. So this is how this slice method work. Now let's talk about stream method. I have created this function for stream, and this function is an async function. So it takes the blob object, and here we are using this method stream. As I told you, stream return us readable stream, and we can get access to that stream with the help of getReader method. And finally, we can use this method stream.read to read different parameters from that stream. So this is what happen in stream. Basically, stream is used when there is transfer of data from one machine to another. For example, this is machine 1 and this is, or we can say computer 1 or computer 2. Here this stream is passed continuously. So we have two parameters. One is the done and another is the value. So done initially equal to false, it means stream is still going on. When done is equal to true, it means stream is completed. That's why we have these two parameters from, these two properties from this stream. So if done, then we can say all data is being processed, otherwise we can console.log each of that value. So let's call this function blob stream, and let's see what it is going to do. After transfer of all the data, it is displaying this data. So this is how this stream work. Only two methods left. One is the text and another is the arrayBuffer. As I told you, this method return us promise, and that promise is resolved to actual value. For example, here I should call it blob array buffer. I have created this function blob array buffer. This is an asynchronous function. So I'm passing this blob object as parameter, and I'm using this function array buffer. This array buffer function return us promise. That's why I'm using await keyword. Await keyword resolve that promise and give us that actual value. And finally, I'm displaying that value. Obviously, this array buffer is going to return us the buffer of that blob content. Let me call this function blob array buffer. Let's pass that blob object. So in console, you can see it is returning us array buffer. And if you are using that method text, then it is going to return us the text. There you go. So this is all about blob object, and each of these methods are explained in this blob. So I have explained everything in great detail. You can check out this blog page.